I feel great. Give me the mic. My drunk mother-in-law, Diana, grabbed the microphone from my friend during her speech and started talking. My father-in-law, Stephen, was completely wasted, causing a ruckus with the relatives. To make things worse, Diana made a speech mocking me. What did I ever do to her? Why do I deserve this? Just when I was about to burst into tears, my niece Elizabeth said something that completely changed the atmosphere of the room. My name is Mary. I'm 48 years old and have gained quite a bit of weight from indulging in buffet meals with my husband, Kevin. And to make matters worse, Kevin seems to lose weight effortlessly with just a bit of exercise. Isn't it great? Now we can eat even more. When he said that, I was so annoyed that I almost considered switching his dinners to lard for a week. I love Kevin, but right now, I hate his metabolism. I keep telling myself I'll get fit and make him fall for me all over again, but here I am, enjoying another delicious meal. I married my husband, Kevin, who is a year younger than me, 5 years ago. Thanks to our strong bond, our relationship progressed smoothly from dating to marriage, but things got tough after that. During a family meeting, "Why did you marry an older woman who can't even have children?" Diana said. Stephen also sighed deeply, saying, "I wanted a young wife for my son." My first impression of them was that they were extremely rude people. According to Kevin, his family is like a den of evil. Diana has always been harsh on the women Kevin brings home, and his previous girlfriend was driven away, preventing their marriage. Stephen is a womanizer. He's cheated multiple times in the past and has no interest in Diana. Their marriage is strained because of it. Stephen's desire for a younger wife likely stems from his wish for a bit of eye candy around the house, which Diana can't provide. Despite their strong opposition, Kevin said, "Let's just get married without their permission." But I didn't think that was the right way, so I kept visiting my in-laws' house to gain their approval for our marriage. Because I love Kevin. It's only natural to want to get along with his family. Especially since I didn't want to get married while being opposed by them. So, after finally getting their approval and achieving our marriage, one day, Diana said something like this. "You know, my mother-in-law used to torment me all the time. So, I decided that when my son got a wife, I'd do the same." Seeing Diana speak with an untroubled smile sent chills down my spine. In short, our age difference didn't matter at all. She just wanted to harass someone, no matter what. Surely, Kevin's previous girlfriends were harassed without any fault of their own. I decided to keep a suitable distance and minimize interactions with her as much as possible. However, when we started looking for a wedding venue, Diana began to interfere. "You should incorporate your parents' opinions into the wedding," she said. "But it's our wedding, and they're not even paying for it. Why should we go that far?" Needless to say, that's what I thought. However, when I talked to my already married friends about it, I was told the same thing and ended up incorporating my in-laws' opinions. Many of them said, "After all, they're your husband's parents. It seems to be a matter of showing some respect." Though I felt uneasy, I could see some sense in that. Kevin said, "Just ignore them." But it's their only son's wedding. We couldn't just ignore them. At least, we decided to listen to their opinions even if we didn't necessarily follow them. However, I soon regretted that decision. They proposed a venue run by one of Diana's friends, claiming the venue we had in mind was too expensive. It was old and had reviews on the site saying things like, "The proceedings were different than planned," or "They got our names wrong." Of course, Kevin vetoed that, but then they started saying things like, "Make sure the bride's dress is cheap." She suggested using hand-me-downs from her own wedding to save money, saying not to waste money. Who would want to wear something covered in cobwebs and aged over time? I knew Diana's real intention was simply that she didn't want to see the bride being the center of attention. So I flatly refused. She made all sorts of other demands, but they were all absurd suggestions that would have made the wedding a disaster if we had accepted them, so we ended up rejecting most of her requests. In retrospect, this might have ignited Diana's spiteful spirit. Up until the last minute, Diana kept saying things like, "Have the wedding abroad because I want to travel." Or, "If you don't listen to me, I won't attend the wedding." Despite being exasperated by Diana's constant complaints, we somehow managed to get through it as a couple, and finally, the wedding day arrived. Diana showed up in morning attire. It wasn't a formal black suit, but a full-on dress that looked like morning clothes. I felt the pressure of her message. "I don't approve of this wedding." 2 weeks earlier, she had said, "I'm not coming to your wedding." So I had responded with, "Then you don't have to attend." Perhaps that had offended her. She didn't show up in the waiting room and was already seated among the relatives when I noticed, making it difficult to ask her to leave given the atmosphere of the venue. But to anyone watching, it was clear. The groom's wife and her mother-in-law don't get along. My friends and relatives all had troubled expressions on their faces. As the program of the ceremony progressed, the behavior of the groom's relatives gradually became strange. They drank too much and got completely drunk, even heckling the movie Kevin's friend had made for us. We had to ask the staff to remove those relatives. Even Stephen got drunk, swinging around a bottle of homemade liquor brought by a relative like it was a penlight. At the peak of it all, "Waiter! More beer!" he shouted. This is not a pub. Some guests were even let out by the staff, saying they felt sick. Thanks to the staff's consideration, the ceremony managed to proceed, but all my guests were feeling repulsed. It's no wonder, given this nightmare scenario. Kevin and I spent most of the ceremony looking down in shame. It was the worst. And then, during the speech by my friend representing my side, the incident happened. Suddenly, a slightly tipsy Diana snatched the microphone from my friend in the middle of her speech, saying, "I'm in such a good mood, lend me the mic." And then she started to speak. "All right, the groom's mother will give a speech now." Kevin and I were stunned by this unexpected turn of events. Even the staff, seeing Diana's natural movements despite her being drunk, were thrown off, wondering, "Wait, was this part of the plan? Let's talk about Mary. I hear she has been a hard worker since she was a child." To my surprise, Diana's comment wasn't a bad one. If she wasn't saying anything negative, it would be better not to create a worse atmosphere by forcibly removing her. Pretending this was planned from the start might work. The staff and Kevin asked if they should stop her, but I decided to see how it would go. She lost her father when she was young, then later her mother, and her sister, 10 years her senior, raised her in place of her parents. That sister also passed away from a chronic illness not too long ago. Mary is a remarkable woman who has faced hardships my son couldn't even imagine. Listening for a while, Diana's speech wasn't bad. She talked about how my parents passed away, and although I faced hardships, I managed to go to college with the support of my sister and others. It's a heavy story not really suited for a celebratory occasion, but it was true to my life and not a lie. She was properly acknowledging my past, and my relatives were moved to tears by her words. It was a good speech. I even thought Diana had a good side. But about 30 minutes into the speech, Diana said this. "But don't you think it's because Mary is a bad luck charm that her parents died, and her sister passed away young from a chronic illness? I was truly shocked when I heard this at the family meeting. She probably just wants attention, like, oh, poor me, I've had such a hard life. She wants to brag about her hardships, right? She's so oblivious, she doesn't realize we have no interest in such stories. Everyone, not just me, was dumbfounded by Diana's laughing words. Since everyone was drawn into my past story, the sudden shift in Diana's tone was shocking. What Diana did was ultimately to reveal my painful past in front of everyone and mock it. I talked about my family during the family meeting because I couldn't hide the fact that my parents were gone, and I never intended it to be a tale of woe. If I could, I would still want to meet my living family members. There's no way I was boasting about my misfortunes. I knew my bridal makeup would be ruined, but I couldn't help it and tears began to fall. At that moment, ha ha ha, resounding in the silent hall was the voice of my niece, Elizabeth, who was in the 10th grade. Thinking her speech had been well received, Diana, in high spirits, said, "I'm glad to see you enjoyed it." Then Elizabeth stood up. No, that's not it. And she said, "You say Mary is bragging about her misfortunes, but what are you old hag trying to do by droning on about someone's hardships? Look at this awkward atmosphere." "Who are you calling old hag? I'm the groom's mother. You rude little girl." Seeing the furious Diana, Elizabeth laughed mockingly again. "Who is the rude one here? You showed up to a wedding in mourning attire, and then you tried to make fun of the bride. Well, no one is laughing, so you're just making a fool of yourself. Not only do you lack common sense, but you also have no idea how to read the room. Isn't that embarrassing? Even a little girl like me knows this situation is embarrassing. Maybe it's because you're getting old and everything is starting to deteriorate?" Saying that, Elizabeth raised her hands and shrugged, as if to say, "Oh well," making Diana's face turn bright red. "Unbelievable! How dare you? Mary, how could you let Elizabeth talk to her elders like that?" Diana glared at me as she spoke. "With all due respect, I think Elizabeth is right. Diana, your speech wasn't part of the program, and if you were sharing something entertaining, that would be different. But please don't interrupt my friend's speech with such a tedious story. It's very unpleasant." "That's right, Mom. I don't know why you want to humiliate Mary in front of everyone, but can't you see everyone feels uncomfortable? You're not just being mean, you're coming off as an ignorant person," as Elizabeth said. At our words, Diana's face turned even redder, like a tomato, making us want to say, "Can you still blush?" "Unbelievable! Unbelievable! Unbelievable! What do you think of your elders, your parents? How could you embarrass me like this?" "You embarrassed yourself with your actions." Elizabeth's quick retort made my guests start laughing, even though the in-laws were still heavily drunk. "That's right. Since we've been respecting you as an elder, let me say what everyone hasn't dared to say, old hag." Elizabeth's sudden innocent smile caught Diana off guard, making her momentarily speechless. "Your dress is inside out." "What?" Elizabeth's remark caused laughter to erupt in the hall. Everyone had noticed that Diana was wearing her dress inside out. You'd think someone from the in-laws' side would have pointed it out, but most of their guests were men. Moreover, it seemed no one had much interest in Diana's dress. No one bothered to tell her. Showing up in mourning attire and then wearing it inside out, how embarrassing. People like you really do live long, don't they? As Elizabeth laughed, Diana, finally realizing her embarrassment, desperately tried to cover her chest with her hands. Stephen, seeing this, burst out laughing. "Ha ha ha!" Stephen pointed at Diana and laughed. Everyone, including Kevin and me, and probably our guests, noticed Diana's eyes filled with anger, but Stephen and the in-laws' guests didn't seem to catch on. "Well, I guess I'll look for a new wife then." Stephen laughed. Then a relative from the in-laws' side shouted, "What about Nancy from the bar?" Stephen responded, "Oh, right, right." And they all started laughing and having a great time. Diana's existence was already forgotten. Even Stephen. Unbelievable. "Do you enjoy embarrassing me like this in such a place?" Diana shouted in anger, but soon she grabbed a bottle of liquor from a nearby table and headed towards Stephen. "I won't forgive you." Diana raised the bottle, making Stephen turn pale. Everyone thought, "This is bad, the police might be called." Just then, Elizabeth rushed in and splashed the liquor from the table all over Diana and Stephen. "Cool down! Are you going to cause more trouble at someone's wedding? Staff! Get these people out of here!" Though everyone was stunned by the series of bizarre events, Elizabeth's words brought them back to reality, and the staff hurriedly restrained Diana and Stephen. The staff asked, "Is it all right if we escort your parents out?" Kevin and I both smiled. "Please do." And we answered. So, the chaotic wedding finally came to an end amidst all the commotion. A few days later, we went to visit my in-laws with my late sister's husband, Thomas. Thomas came along because Elizabeth was deeply involved in the incident, and my sister, who was like a parent to me, was no longer there. Thomas was also very angry that my wedding was ruined. And he intended to make the in-laws pay for the wedding expenses. At first, the in-laws resisted, saying things like, "I was drunk," or "It's not right to solve this with money." However, when Thomas, a former boxer still muscular, lightly grabbed Stephen by the collar, "Yes, we will pay," Stephen quickly said. He must have been really scared. They paid the entire wedding cost in cash that day, and at the same time, Kevin declared he was cutting ties with them. Kevin bowed his head to me, saying, "I should have done this sooner." But I couldn't blame Kevin. I was also at fault for letting my guard down, even for a moment, thinking, maybe they'll say something nice. We decided to become a good couple by overcoming such hardships. After that, Stephen ended up in a wheelchair last year, and Diana contacted us. "Please help with caregiving." But Kevin ignored it. Apparently, Diana also has some difficulty with her hands due to arthritis. She seemed desperate and turned to Kevin for help. "You're not my parents anymore." Kevin refused to help. The other day, I passed by the area where my in-laws' house used to be, and it was just an empty lot now. Maybe they both went to a facility, but they probably don't have the money for that. Maybe Stephen, in his wheelchair, got into a facility, but Diana might be living somewhere in a park. Come to think of it, I think I saw someone who looked like her in the park recently. Well, they're strangers now, so it's none of my business. I probably won't ever see them again. Meanwhile, we're still living our lives quietly. 2 years later, we added some of our own money to the wedding costs we got back and had a ceremony at a chapel abroad, and finally went on a delayed honeymoon. It was a redo of the wedding. No one from the in-laws' side was invited, but everyone I asked from my side came, and it turned out to be a great ceremony. Elizabeth even said, "I was sad thinking that terrible wedding would be the end, so I'm glad." She gave us a generous wedding gift from the part-time job she worked hard at and a portrait of us that she drew of us couple. She's attending art school, and as expected, she's really good. I felt a bit guilty receiving such a generous gift, but she said, "I think of you more as my real sister than an aunt, so accept it." What a sweet thing to say. When Elizabeth gets married someday, I'll repay her double, no, triple or quadruple with some furniture or something. It was pretty embarrassing to wear a dress 2 years after the wedding, but Kevin said, "You look even more beautiful than the last time you wore it." I was happy to hear that. I did have bridal beauty treatments, but I've got more wrinkles now, so it's not exactly the same. Kevin is so kind. But right after the ceremony, we let our guard down and started enjoying all-you-can-eat buffets, which is Kevin's hobby. This year, at 48, I've suddenly gained quite a bit of weight. Even Kevin teased me, saying, "You've changed, how about going back to the old Mary?" "Shut up! Kevin, your hair is thinning at the back too." That's our way of joking around. I want us to always be a couple who can tease each other and have a friendship-like relationship. We married late, and to live a long life with Kevin, yeah, I need to lose weight. Health is important. All right then, I'm off to go walking with Kevin today. Such a cramped house will probably be destroyed by these twins soon. Yeah, with such an old apartment, it won't last a day with twins who have developmental issues. My brother John's in-laws, laughing uproariously as they roughly closed the door of the apartment room and leave. But I was certain they would regret what they did today. Besides, the three of us will definitely find happiness. I'm Madison. Living for work, and I'm currently 30 years old. Just before graduating middle school, my parents died in an accident, and I chose to work instead of continuing my studies. That's because I have a younger brother, John, and I wanted to use all the money our parents left for John's education costs. John is still thankful for that. I don't mind because I'm blessed with good colleagues and enjoy my work life. John was always good at studying, went on to further education, and got a job at a top trading company. He met a wonderful woman there and got married. They were blessed with twin girls and lived happily. Though within the country, since they live a plane ride away, we can't meet often. But John and his wife, Sophia, frequently contact me by phone or message, making their family's happiness my happiness too. Yet. What? John and his? As usual, after finishing work, I looked at my personal cell phone to find a ton of missed calls. Calling back that number, I was told of the death of John and his wife. John and his wife were said to have left this world in an accident, just like my parents, but it was hard to believe. No way! My world went dark, and with help from my colleagues, I somehow managed to book a flight to John's town. Arriving, I finished the funeral without being able to believe the reality before me. Sophia's parents, that is, John's in-laws, live a 30-minute drive from where John and his wife lived. Thus, the in-laws actively offered to take care of the young nieces. They want to continue looking after the two. While I felt a bit disappointed, thinking of the young nieces made me accept that it might be for the best. Well, since I have work, I'll be off. Please contact me if you'd be willing to let me look after the nieces. Here's my address and phone number. It's okay. There are cute grandchildren. No need for contact. John's in-laws finished all the procedures and, wanting to see the twin nieces one last time, closed the door in front of me. The nieces must be unstable having lost their parents. Meeting someone and talking might be a burden for them. I tried to forget the cold attitude of the in-laws with those thoughts. However, a month later. Excuse me, Madison, are you there? On my day off, the apartment doorbell suddenly rang fiercely, and upon answering, I found the in-laws furious, each holding a niece's hand. What brings you here all of a sudden? You flew here today? Pushing past me as I asked in surprise, the in-laws with the nieces entered my room. Flew here, yes. Went through a lot of trouble. Father-in-law Thomas seemed quite angry. All that trouble just for what? To hand these two over to you. Mother-in-law Abigail glared at the twins with a stern face. Ignoring my surprise, the in-laws started to surround my room's table. After drinking the coffee I served, they began to speak. We took them in believing they were polite and academically advanced for 5-year-olds, but it was entirely different. They break things, throw tantrums quickly. They fight fiercely and don't sleep early. They also don't want to go to preschool. It was so strange we showed them to a doctor friend. Thomas's words surprised me. Although we hadn't met often, the two I knew were well-behaved children. So, what did the doctor say? When I asked, Thomas continued gravely. Both have significant developmental issues. Truly, we were deceived. I was more shocked by Thomas's words of being deceived than the fact that the twin nieces had developmental issues. What do you mean, deceived? We took them in thinking they'd be grandchildren we could be proud of in society. Our daughter hardly let us meet them while she was alive. That's right. Because we couldn't meet them, we believed the stories from our daughter about how smart and mature the twins were. The in-laws continued to claim they were victims deceived into taking care of the children. I couldn't believe their words and couldn't help myself but to talk back. Doesn't every child hold an irreplaceable place as your precious daughter? To say such things in front of them. Abigail scoffed at me, trembling with anger. Well, you Madison, who hasn't graduated high school and works in a factory, probably doesn't mind having problematic children, right? That's right. John was excellent, but you're terrible. We thought you would get along with these twins, so we came to hand them over. I remembered John hinting that Sophia wanted to keep her distance from her real parents. And I understood. I, too, wanted to keep my distance from these two, smirking meaninglessly before me. Taking them in would be my wish. I wanted to stay calm for the sake of the twins, who looked anxious. When I told them so with a composed voice, the in-laws burst into loud laughter, perhaps relieved. Ah, good, good. It's best for those who are not excellent to stick together and live together. That's right. I thought it would be hard to live with children in such an old-fashioned apartment, but you seem like the type who wouldn't mind that at all. Good for you. Then they started to boast about how excellent they were. I, too, once aspired to be a doctor and devoted myself to my studies. The bitter memory of not being able to afford medical school and having to become a full-time employee instead. I was so beautiful that I once won a beauty contest. Maybe I could have been the beautiful wife of a doctor. The friend who is a doctor we mentioned earlier was a classmate from when I was aiming to be a doctor. Despite me being better, his family had money. If only your family had money, you could have been a doctor and owned your own hospital, and I could have been the beautiful lady of the house. Their nostalgic remarks with no bragging rights seemed endless. Sorry. I'm not good with what-if discussions. What are you trying to say? Thomas cleared his throat to put an end to it. Well, to summarize, our respectable family lineage does not suit these twins. That's it. The twins with developmental issues are nothing to boast about. Live quietly and lonely with them, since you work in a factory. Maybe we'll visit occasionally, just for the sake of other relatives. Being thought of as a cold grandmother by relatives who know nothing of the situation would be irritating. This cramped house might be destroyed by these twins in no time. Well, it's such an old apartment. If the twins have developmental problems, it won't last even a day. After saying what they wanted, the in-laws stood up, said no farewells to the nieces, and roughly closed the apartment door behind them. Good grief! I sighed and looked at the twin nieces, huddled in the corner of the room. Both of them had tense, stiff faces. It's been a while, hasn't it? It must be surprising to be brought to such a small house all of a sudden. How about we eat some snacks together? The twins trembled and did not move. I placed juice and snacks near them and sat directly on the floor myself. You must be tired, right? Today, you can eat whatever you like and rest as much as you want. At my words, my niece Mia reached for the snacks. Yummy! As Mia began to eat, the other niece, Evelyn, also started. The sight of the small children eagerly eating the snacks was adorable, and I couldn't help but watch. Then, Evelyn, while eating a cookie, accidentally dropped some crumbs. I didn't mind at all, but Mia suddenly got angry when she noticed. You're spilling it! I didn't mean to! Before I could intervene, the nieces started a fierce argument. Let's calm down, both of you. It's okay. I repeatedly spoke to the two, now in a tussle, trying to calm them down. The twins were arguing fiercely. Imagining how insecure they must have felt since losing their parents, I ended up crying with them. Holding them while we all cried, the nieces stared at me. Madison, do you not want us anymore? Surprised by the question, I quickly stopped crying and shook my head. Of course not. I was looking forward to living happily with everyone starting from today. Why would you ask that? In response to my question, the twin nieces looked sad and glanced at each other. Grandma and Grandpa said noisy kids are sick and not wanted. We thought maybe you didn't want us because we're strange. That's not true at all. Like I said earlier, I was planning to live happily with everyone starting from today. As long as you two don't mind it, we'll live together forever. When I said that with emphasis, the twins looked at each other again and started crying all over. That night, as I watched over the two exhausted and sleeping children, I contacted someone I knew. They needed as much healing as possible for the emotional wounds of losing their parents. And because I couldn't agree with what the in-laws were claiming. From the next day, I poured all the love I could into caring for my two nieces. Of course, it's hard because I'm not their real parent. A 5-year-old child can be inconsolable when they cry, and they're at the age where they want to express their willfulness. Still, I faced the two head-on at all times. Perhaps because of that, the two started to look much happier than when they first came to my house. Madison, will you be there even if we fall asleep? Occasionally, they'd ask me this before sleeping, looking a bit insecure. Of course, I'll always be by your side, so don't worry. I always answered gently while watching over the twins. But, living day by day with the sisters in my apartment, I had only one worry. Maybe this place is a bit too small for us all to live together. What are we going to do, Madison? That's right. I guess we'll go ahead with that plan after all. I decided to execute a plan I had been considering for the two of them. When I talked about it, the twins' eyes lit up. But their enthusiasm dampened suddenly. What if Grandma and Grandpa come and say mean things to us and you again? Their worry was understandable. Those in-laws had said they would come by sometimes, just to show their face to other relatives. I felt it was my responsibility to erase the traumatic memories they had of them. Both of you, then next time Grandma and Grandpa come. Though there was no need, I whispered to the twins a special plan to repel the in-laws' attack. The chance came during the next long holiday. While Mia, Evelyn, and I were enjoying a leisurely day off, the in-laws suddenly visited. Madison, what are you thinking? Abigail was in lecture mode. What do you mean? What am I thinking? Not what do you mean? Moving into such a fancy high-rise condo. Why would you do something so reckless with 2 kids? The in-laws were greeted by the beautiful living room of the new high-rise apartment I had moved into. Looking around the spacious and comfortable space, Thomas was also frustrated. "How much of a loan did you take out for this, not having gone to high school and working in a factory? I was surprised when I got the notice that you moved. You're not planning to push those uncontrollable grandchildren back onto us, are you? It's impossible. Those twins have developmental issues. They can't live with normal people like us. You're not thinking of asking us for money, are you?" As usual, the noisy in-laws prompted me to sigh and start explaining one thing at a time. "I purchased this high-rise condo in cash, so don't worry." Cash purchase? How can someone working in a factory do something like that? It's true I work in a factory, but actually. In the middle of my explanation, I heard the sound of small footsteps from the hallway. "Grandma, Grandpa, welcome to our house." "Hello, please make yourself comfortable." Entering the living room were Mia and Evelyn, dressed in elegant matching dresses prepared for this day. "Oh, you look quite cute and intelligent. You wouldn't be embarrassed to show them off anywhere." When the in-laws had them, the two were made to wear the same few clothes over and over, rather than getting any new ones. Knowing this fact, I glared at the in-laws sharply. "They've always been very cute and intelligent. Whether they have developmental issues or not, that doesn't change." "Why are you making such a scary face all of a sudden?" It was the first time the in-laws who had been bad-mouthing me flinched. I was determined to say what I wanted to say on this occasion. "I've always wondered, did you really take these two to a doctor and get a diagnosis?" "Of course." "You're saying we're lying?" As the in-laws started to panic, I nodded vigorously. "Yes. Right after they came here, I had them seen by a specialist I know. And then?" "And then?" "They're just unstable because they lost their parents, but there's no problem with their development." "You work in a factory and have connections with experts? Is that doctor even reliable?" Thomas asked, clearly uneasy, and I responded with anger still in my voice. "He's an expert actively researching mental care. I met him through my factory job and have been receiving his kindness." "Such a prestigious person through factory work?" "That's a lie. Even we don't have such distinguished acquaintances." As the in-laws continued with their disrespectful remarks, I pressed on. "First of all, the friend Thomas claims to have shown the twins to, isn't he misdiagnosing? Is he even a specialist? What field does he practice in?" After shifting his gaze for a while, Thomas answered in a low voice. "Orthopedics." "That's out of his field." Shocked, I raised my voice, and Abigail raised hers in defiance. "A doctor is a doctor, right? He's a renowned doctor who diagnosed this person's slipped disc at a glance." "Slipped disc?" I was surprised. Abigail's attempt to defend, which didn't really serve as a defense, slightly rejuvenated Thomas, who continued with a smug look. "He's out of his field, but there's no mistake he's a renowned doctor. After all, he was a friend from when I aspired to be a doctor. A man as educated and solid as myself." "And when exactly did Thomas aspire to be a doctor?" "What?" It must have been an inconvenient question. Thomas, who didn't try to answer with a laugh, received my smirk in return. Huh?" After an odd exchange of smiles, Thomas looked away and answered again in a low voice. "When I was in the first grade of elementary school." All I could do was give a wry smile, but Abigail couldn't let it go. "Wait, so all that talk about being praised as a genius when you were younger was actually about when you were in elementary school?" It seems Thomas had been boasting quite a bit at home, as Abigail's momentum was fierce. "Being called a genius is still amazing, right?" And what subject were you called a genius in? Digging further seemed pointless. But I asked anyway. Thomas, attempting to feign ignorance again, met my silent gaze. Well, I was good at skipping rope. They would say genius, genius every time I jumped. Thomas confessed in a murmur, sounding utterly pathetic. So, you've been bragging about skipping rope this whole time? What kind of genius is that? And you, boasting nonstop about being first in a beauty contest. Where was that contest held? At a local festival, but first place in a beauty contest is still first place. Better than skipping rope. A local festival. That's a scam, a scam. Which is better, though? The most trivial marital spat in the world. As the two seemed about to start yelling at each other, I cleared my throat, and the in-laws snapped back to reality. What were we talking about? Oh yes, our grandchildren having absolutely no developmental issues. That's right, that's right. If they're behaving so quietly and cutely, it does make them seem like our grandchildren, doesn't it? The two then united in their approach towards me. Madison, we'll forgive you for recklessly buying a high-rise condo. But living with these children from now on is indeed impossible for you. That's right. What if they say they want to go to medical school? Can you afford their tuition with a factory job? Impossible, right? It's not impossible. The factory I currently manage, all four of them, are running smoothly. I stated the facts calmly, and the in-laws were astonished beyond belief. Factory management? Yes. I started working in a factory after graduating middle school, climbed up the ranks, and took over 5 years ago. Since then, I've been successfully managing for factories. That would make us not embarrassed to be associated with you in our family. I only knew you worked at a factory. I do work at a factory, that's true. And the connection with the mental care expert was? Yes, since I employ many workers, I wanted to focus on mental care, so I asked him to conduct a seminar, which led to our acquaintance. Buying a high-rise condo in cash too. If you're managing factories, you must have saved a lot, right? So, affording their living expenses and tuition. Well, I lived in an old apartment until now. I can cover my niece's living expenses and tuition with my savings and future income. The in-laws, their eyes shining as they asked about my financial situation, made me sigh, although it was something I had anticipated. Such savings? Give me some. I mean, hey, Madison. Suddenly, Abigail's tone softened as she changed her attitude towards me. It's really too much to leave the grandchildren with you alone. Right, dear? Well, if it's all right with you, we can take the grandchildren off your hands, and Madison, you could support financially. Surrounded by the two inching closer, I could only sigh. I winked at my nieces, sending them a signal. Talking is so boring. We want to play in the park. Let's go to the park. It's okay, right? The twins began begging innocently, as if signaling the start of our plan. Eager to win the twins' favor, the in-laws readily agreed to their proposal. Let's go to the park and play with Grandma and Grandpa. Yes, we need to start getting along better. Even on the way to the park in front of the high-rise condo, the in-laws tried desperately to hold the twins' hands and overacted to get their attention. Yay, park, park! The twins exaggerated their excitement as they entered the park. So, Madison, you're single, and you might find someone nice in the future, right? That's right. If you have these children then, you might find them a nuisance, right? So, let us take the twins, and you just provide financial support. I responded loudly, more than necessary, to the two trying desperately to continue their conversation. "No, thank you." On a sunny Saturday afternoon, the park was full of families. Everyone turned to look at us when I raised my voice. "Madison, maybe keep your voice down a bit." Worried about public perception, the in-laws panicked at just that. Ignoring their attempts to calm me, I asked the twin nieces loudly, "Do you two hate living with Grandma and Grandpa?" The twins responded energetically as if venting their frustration. "We absolutely hate living with Grandma and Grandpa. They're mean. Grandma and Grandpa always say horrible things to us. Go away, both of you." "Hey, we're offering to take in you orphans, and this is how you repay us?" Abigail momentarily showed a demonic expression. But the twins weren't the type to be intimidated. "Go away! Go away!" The young nieces began loudly chanting for them to leave, and the in-laws were confused. By then, the gathered crowd at the park was looking at the in-laws with cold eyes and murmuring among themselves. I seized the perfect moment to raise my voice further. "Anyway, you two. Calling them no good, nothing to be proud of. I haven't forgotten the terrible things you said to my precious nieces. Madison, you don't need to bring that up now. You're the ones who forgot what you said and are trying to cozy up now. The idea of taking them in now for show is ridiculous." Abigail turned pale in panic as I pressed on. "And to think you're after my money too. If you keep pestering us, I'll call the police." I knew it was a childish threat and that the police wouldn't act on such a matter. But it was highly effective against the two who cared so much about public image. "We won't come near again." As they hastily fled the park, the sight of the in-laws' backs was pitiful. Watching them leave, I high-fived my beaming nieces, celebrating our victory. As for the in-laws, their actions regarding the twins eventually became known to other relatives, leading to their social exclusion. Well, I was the one who spread the rumor. This caused their relationship to deteriorate, and they were on the brink of divorce. They were responsible for their own fate. The twin nieces are living happily, receiving proper counseling from my expert acquaintance. "We want to live with you forever." They say such moving things. But I aim for them to find their own paths in work and family life, leaving this home healthy and strong. I plan to continue showering them with love, helping them walk their own lives confidently.